Welcome to the Evidence Informed Teaching Podcast. Are you a teacher wanting to improve your classroom practice and deliver excellent teaching through access to research? Do you have a passion for teaching and are looking to connect with other like-minded colleagues through professional discussions? The Chartered College has partnered with TeacherTap to support teachers to deliver excellent teaching through access to research, and we invite you to be part of this community. On this podcast, you will hear from fellow teachers, research experts, and you have the opportunity to be part of this professional discussion. You can find out more about the Chartered College of Teaching and TeacherTap in the show notes. And if you find this episode helpful, why not share it with a teacher friend, take a screenshot and post it on your social media, or even better, leave us a 5-star written review.
And welcome to our podcast this morning. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers. So I'm Dr Victoria Cook, Education Research and Project Specialist at the Chartered College of Teaching.
I'm Louise Quaid, the Executive Principal for Littlegreen Academy, an SEMH provision for pupils in West Sussex, and Redwood Park Academy, a school for children with complex learning difficulties in Portsmouth.
Hello, I'm Dr Kelly Woodford-Richens. I'm currently Programme Director of Basins Local Alliance SCIT, but also Director of Development and Research for Solent Academy.
So today we're going to be talking a bit about the research that you're implementing in your settings. So first of all, if you could give a brief overview of the current research and in particular what inspired it, please.
So basically, as a teacher training provider, the new core content framework meant you had to be completely research informed, and that completely aligned with how I was teaching in my career as a science teacher and lead practitioner within a school. That kind of research informed pedagogies, from retrieval practice, interleave and dual coding, all those kind of things. And having the opportunity to train my teachers in those pedagogies from the start of their career was so exciting when the new frameworks came out. So that's been really exciting, and then extending that to training teachers in partnership schools. All my schools are mainstream schools. So when our lead school, which is Dove House, joined Solent Academy's Trust, which is a specialist school provision trust, it was really exciting to kind of combine those two ideas of, we know these cognitive science and pedagogies work in mainstream schools, but the evidence is really limited. All the EF guidance reports around cognitive science, and when you do kind of literature searches, there's a real vacuum of research of whether those cognitive science pedagogies apply in specialist settings. So when our school joins the trust, it was really exciting to kind of think, actually, we've got a real opportunity here to find out. We expect they will work, we expect they're applicable within specialist settings, but we don't know that for sure. I think there's a real need to answer that question one way or the other. Working with Louise, who's very excited about research, Louise is obtained Charter College membership for every person in the school. So that's just really exciting, trying to bring everybody on that journey toward being research informed across. And there's certainly practices within the school that are research informed, like Thrive, that have been embedded in Littlegreen, which Louise can talk about more, but actually kind of really looking at the pedagogies and the teaching and learning within those schools to see whether, and doing some action research, starting on that journey of how can we do this, how can we answer this question? It's a big question that needs answering.
Louise, I'm just really fascinated to hear a bit more about the membership of the college for your staff, and also your previous experience with Thrive.
I think I'll start with the membership for the college, because I have a real passion for empowering teachers to understand their professional status in our society. We know that teachers have struggled with a public image of difficulty over the last number of years, particularly throughout the pandemic. And I really wanted to say to the cohort of teachers we work with in Solent Academy's Trust that they are the specialists. They know their children. They provide very carefully thought through teaching and learning in the classrooms that's really personalised to each individual child. And the very best practice comes from a natural curiosity and understanding of the child in front of them, carefully considering their needs on a day-to-day basis and over a long period of time. And in that work, they're continuously pausing, assessing, reflecting, and then renewing the work that they're doing. Not only are they doing that for themselves and the classes that they work with, but also alongside a large cohort of teaching assistants who are instrumental in the delivery of that education. And I think really to ensure that we are bringing to the classroom the highest possible standards, we need to remind ourselves that teachers need to be supported in their professional development in a way that brings them into the conversation. It empowers them to seek new ideas, but also to evaluate whether the impact they're having is actually positive, and really allowing them to have that voice in the process and really collecting their expertise in everything that we do. Because often CPD opportunities are done too. There's an element of delivery or expectation and a direction. So we can fall into the trap of telling teachers this is how to teach. Go away, do it in this way, and that is considered the correct style. But we know from children with SEND that actually they really do need all of the tools in our kit to bring together the right environment, the right resources, the correct relationships in order for them to succeed efficiently and effectively over a short to long period of time. So really coming back to the chartered college, making sure that staff know that they are a valued resource, that they are heard and that they are incorporated into the school development plan is really important to me.
That's really powerful, Louise. Thank you. So you've got this fabulous idea. You've got this highly engaged, motivated staff body. So how did you go about developing this initial idea into a research plan?
Lots of research on how to kind of conduct research within a specialist setting. As a scientist, I know how to do it in a lab environment, but conducting research in school environment is very different. And when you look at the research that's out there in a specialist setting, you can't necessarily apply exactly the same methodologies because you can't necessarily look at quantitative data. You need to look at qualitative data as well, and kind of looking at mixed method approaches, doing lots of reading around that in educational settings, trying to understand how do you actually do this. And I think a really large important part of this is ensuring that we slow down. Sometimes it's very easy to get an idea to kind of jump in, but the exploration phase of this has been huge. Really, as Louise says, really investigating that internal expertise that sits within the trust and that Louise's two schools, because that's going to be one of the most powerful elements of this, is that we're using the expertise that's already there, rather than, as Louise says, something that's done to the staff. It's exploring the expertise and then thinking carefully about how we're going to do this, and using both like qualitative data from staff via surveys, staff voice, looking at their expertise and their sense of where they are on their kind of research informed journey in terms of those pedagogies, and then using kind of mapping out a plan, having a timeline of what do we want to do at each point, like surveys, workshops, things like journal clubs. How are we going to incorporate that? And as Louise is doing, the kind of most important part is incorporating all of those things into her school improvement plan. I just have these kind of crazy ideas of we want to do this research, but Louise's got that kind of finger on the pulse of this is how we're going to actually do this in reality. So that kind of mixture of that drive for research that I've got absolutely coalescing with Louise's drive too, and her ability to actually make that happen within her schools using the expertise with her staff. So yeah, mapping out really carefully, kind of using lots of data, qualitative and quantitative, and thinking about what are we actually having a real clear active ingredients. What are we going to really be looking for? What is our sole purpose? What are we hoping to achieve? And clarity around that before we start. And then kind of a bit rose and shine, those small steps, how are we actually going to get there across a kind of long period of time rather than just jumping in and doing it badly. Collaboration, taking staff with you is such an important part of this. So it's not something that they're forced to do. But as Louise said, empowering them with the tools. And as Louise said, that's the most important part of this research, is that as Louise has pointed out very articulately, those staff know their children and care for those children so carefully and well. Actually, they're going to be the ones that can come up with the necessary adaptations we need to make for doing the research, and for exploring those necessary adaptations we need to do in terms of those pedagogies with the children within the schools, which is really exciting.
Thank you, Kelly. So what's your overall sort of research question?
Basically about the clickability. So the kind of is promoting student learning in specialist setting by embedding research informed practices is kind of the key overarching theme that we're looking at. And not to say that student learning wasn't happening already, of course it is. It's just about promoting it. How can we take it? What else can we do to keep promoting it and improve student achievement over time in those specialist settings, using those research informed practices that we know work in mainstream? It's kind of the overarching theme that we're hoping to explore.
And within that, are you looking, sort of zooming in on any particular specific cognitive science strategies, or is that something that you're yet to decide?
In particular, things with retrieval and memory, or obviously transference of information from working memory to long-term memory is obviously really important, and particularly challenging for some of those children because of a variety of reasons. And Louise will be able to talk that, about her children much more in depth than I can. But it's embedding those retrieval practice that's done in a really adapted way so that it supports the learning, because it's not necessarily the same as in mainstream schools. How do we adapt retrieval practices into leaving space practice in those specialist settings?
Louise, then how have you incorporated this research into your school improvement plan?
Solent Academies Trust are currently embarking on a real focus with relational practice. So thinking about how individuals can work together to support each other in being their very best selves through those relationships in a professional capacity. So therefore, if we think of a school community in terms of its expertise, we would have a range of people, perhaps an ECT in their first year, all the way to an upper pay scale teacher, a leader, wealth of experience over many years, and experiencing many different settings, from mainstream to SEND to various disciplines in SEND. So in order to harness that shared expertise and to draw out of each other our knowledge and skills, we need to facilitate that conversation in a way that is structured. So if, as a school, for instance, we say we're going to have a clear focus on valuing those conversations, which we would actually call research, reframing it in a scientific way and bringing to the conversation language around action research, having the evidence, quantitative, qualitative, we can not only improve the quality of education within our own settings so that children have all of those people contributing to their best outcomes, we can then inform a wider national picture so that the people who have the skills in research, such as Kelly, can take those conversations and that information that's drawn out of that process and use it then for a wider distribution, or to confirm, or basically our teachers are always working to find the best way to help children learn. And in a nutshell, in its most simplistic form, we need to know quite quickly, is it effective? Does it work? Is it not? And that's happening all the time in our classrooms. But if we could collectively draw together and say, actually, this is really effective, this is not so much in this circumstance, what can we do more of, what can we reduce, that's going to only be better for everybody involved, not only the outcomes for pupils, which is our primary concern, but also the workload for staff, making sure that they are feeling confident in what they're doing and they're doing more of the right things.
So where are you currently in this process?
Right at the beginning. So Kelly and I have had a conversation. We're both passionate about wanting to get the outcomes, and we both want to see it happening in classrooms as quickly as possible. So we joined together and established that we want to bring the teachers in and talk with them very carefully about what it is that we're hoping to achieve. Those meetings are happening this week and next week. The school improvement plan will then be carefully constructed for the academic year 2024 to 2025. And once we have clarity of the shorter term objectives in terms of an annual event, we're then going to schedule over the year the activities that are necessary in order to find out the answer to the big question. And as Kelly said, the question is around that retrieval of memory. Our young people have challenges in terms of the executive functioning. They are needing huge amounts of scaffolding to support their learning so that they're not spending all their energy coping with the environment. They need to have that right in order to focus on the learning that we want them to achieve. But actually, how do we, with best effect, help young people with learning difficulties have that memory embedded from the short term to the long term as effectively as possible?
you're at the beginning of the process, but I'm sure many conversations have happened to get you to this point. So have you faced any uncertainties or challenges so far? And if so, how have you overcome these?
I have attempted to do this work before in a school that had a school improvement process from inadequate to good. We know that Littlegreen has been on a journey. Previously, I found that if the cohort and the community are not yet ready, it doesn't have the impact that you hope for, because they need to be fully supported in the day-to-day application of systems and processes within the school to ensure that there's capacity then for additional work and additional questioning and exploration with creativity. And those things come from a sure foundation. And once a school is ready for that, it's going to be much more successful. So for me, ensuring that the school is feeling very well supported in all its systems and processes, everybody is well established in their day-to-day operations, they're confident in their productivity from one term to the next. You can then introduce that creative process of questioning and answers and collaborative working in terms of looking at bigger picture conversation. So for me, I think it's really important that the cohort of people you're working with are emotionally ready, that they're enjoying the process, that it's part of their work they're celebrating, rather than an additional thing on top of them that they're being asked to do that might be seen as a stressful event. So we really, really want teachers who are ready to say, oh yeah, we're doing really, really well. We know we're doing a good job. We want the best for our children. We're going to have a really exciting conversation about what it is that we can do together to make this even better. And we're going to be sharing that with a wider audience when we're ready. And that enthusiasm, that ability to buy in together with that shared vision, comes from a place of preparedness, being ready and supported. It's really important that leaders in a school are giving the time to their staff, giving the resources, structuring timetables and meeting opportunities so that they're not having to bolt it onto their day-to-day. It becomes absolutely everything that they're doing in the classroom each day.
And I think just to add to that, kind of the background to that, completing the MPQ, LTD, and the Charter College certificate in evidence-informed practice have been really helpful to kind of really anticipate some of those challenges and think about, and also the EF guidance support on continual professional development, about that importance of the exploration phase before you try and start something new. Is that those approaches, as Louise said, bringing your staff with you on that journey, but how do you do that? And that is, how do you hear their voice and include them in part of that journey? And there's so many facets to that. And I think things like the membership of the Charter College for everybody is a powerful thing that's going to be opening, for those teachers that are great teachers but haven't necessarily thought about research, given, the copies of the impact magazine are going to be, just picking them up and having that in their hands and just thinking about the impact they can then further have themselves by engaging with this process. I think it's going to be really exciting. But yeah, lots of background thinking before we start. I think it has been critical to kind of really get clarity about what we want to do and the processes by how we're going to do that in terms of the data we're going to collect, not just in terms of outcomes, but in terms of preparation and preparing the staff for that journey. So we've already done some survey analysis of expertise. We've done some survey analysis in terms of where people's understanding of things around retrieval. I've delivered workshop to the staff to kind of say, this is how these pedagogies are applicable mainstream settings via these methods, getting them to think about how is this, what are the necessary adaptations we need to make for our settings. And that workshop sparked some really interesting conversations about the low stakes that really opened my eyes and made me start to think about low stakes. What we consider low stakes is not necessarily low stakes for children with SEMH. Things like using the mini whiteboards for retrieval, which I think is my bread and butter. My trainee teachers all use mini whiteboards. It's kind of a given. That's how we do things for AFL. But in an SEMH setting, that's not necessarily the correct thing, the correct methodology, because that consideration of whether that's low stakes or not is very different. And that was, so having those interesting professional conversations with staff and those specialists to think about, to spark their interest and start them thinking about well, how is it different? In my context, how is it different? How could I apply the same theory in my practice?
And I think those baseline sort of surveys that you've already conducted, just to get an understanding of sort of current practice and current expertise in this area, will be really important as well for thinking on, I guess, how you sort of plan this process going forward. Thinking about sort of, have you found within your data sort of different levels of expertise with retrieval practice within your setting?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's really, really, really interesting. So some staff obviously are very much on the journey, and I think necessarily that's and Louise can answer again much better than I can about how you teach within those settings, because you have to do lots of retrieval. But some people were still talking about learning styles in that survey data. So it's kind of, there's a whole range, and it's about how that we're not trying to get everybody up to a 10. It's about marginal gains, that kind of idea in teaching, that we're just trying to make small changes, not overhaul practice, because there's so much good practice going on, but kind of just shifting everybody's understanding towards more research informed ideas via all the mechanisms we've just been talking about.
Big question now. What are your next steps?
As Louise said, Louise kindly arranged, I've got 2 meetings with the staff to talk about how action research work, just introduce an idea of action research, how it might look, what it might feel like, what they're looking for, and just kind of starting those questions off. And then Louise, as she said, is going to make that as part of the kind of school improvement plan. So perhaps Louise can talk about that bit.
I think it's really important to have buy-in and ensure that the staff know how important it is, that we are collectively knowing that the work we do is valuable and what we're going to find out is going to be really crucial. Our teachers need to know that they are necessary for this to be successful, that it rides on them, that they are fundamental to finding out the answers for the children that we teach. And if we can help our teachers feel that what they're doing is the very best possible teaching and learning in the classroom with the best outcomes, that's got to be a winner. And for me, that's a game changer. And it helps everyone, because if you're an ECT and you're still learning your craft, you're going to be empowered to do things in a different way. If you're a long-standing teacher who is perhaps relying on the things you've been doing for a long time and you've not yet had the opportunity to refresh or think differently, it's going to help you maybe pause and look again at the work that you're doing and give you an opportunity to kind of be a leader, in your professional world, in the work that you're doing. And so I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to make a big difference to the schools that we're working in, and I think it will really ignite some passion and interest in teachers who are excellent in the classroom but are very often not fully appreciated because they're quietly getting on with it every single day. And then what I think will happen, I have no doubt that our teaching assistants will be equally as enthused and join in with that work, because it's a whole school improvement plan, and we will be asking them to join us in their own way. I would want to start with the teachers initially and then invite teaching assistants who would be interested and enthused to join the conversation. And that's why we've also provided membership for the Chartered College to the teaching assistants as well. One thing I will say that we didn't quite touch on is that we know in mainstream schools the range of needs is growing. They're growing. Our teachers in mainstream schools are having to cope with quite a variety of different SEND. And if we can really establish which strategies are most effective, we can support our mainstream colleagues in knowing how to reach those young people that they're currently perhaps finding a little more challenging in terms of teaching and learning, and give them the confidence to know the way in which they teach those children is actually effective. Because of course, teaching and learning in a mainstream classroom is very different to a specialist setting. And sometimes I think mainstream colleagues just need to be reassured that what they're doing is actually working and is valuable. It just looks different. And for those children that they're working with SEND, they will learn at a different rate or perhaps demonstrate their progress in different ways. And if you're a mainstream teacher having to understand that, we can help with that knowledge with a publication, if we're able to publicize our findings, then it can help others to feel better in terms of their own teaching and learning in their own settings in different places around the country.
Yeah, just to add to that, listening to the Maximising Cognitive Science webinar that was on last Thursday, there was a big discussion around children with SEND and the vacuum of kind of understanding around cognitive science for those students. So I think Louise is absolutely right, that contributing to research to support not just children within specialist settings, but the children with SEND within mainstream schools as well. I think it's going to be really powerful and exciting.
And thinking about ways that you will be able to disseminate those findings more widely will be an important part of this process. Sounds like you've got an incredibly busy year ahead with a very exciting potential findings on the horizon. So I know certainly it would be wonderful to meet up again and talk about this process and some of your findings and reflections in another podcast at a later date.